Great. Okay, so very quickly, just so that you can orient yourselves as to who the Impact Management Project is. We are a project for the public good. We were set up exclusively for the purpose of bringing together organisations to debate the technical side of this practice of measurement and management of impacts. And you can see on the slides here the logos of the organisations that have enabled us to do the work that we're doing. And really the point of showing you all the logos is just to show you how diverse a group that is. It's you know, you've got UBS as the largest wealth manager in the world, alongside, you know, BlackRock is the largest asset manager, but all the way through to the UK government, which is UK Aid, FMO, which is the Dutch Development Finance Institution, Big Society Capital, of which Sir Ronald was the founding vision and chair, and then also, you know, wealth managers of the likes of Barclays in the UK, but then Bank of America, all over the world as well. And they came together with philanthropy, with the foundations, the Ford Foundation, the Omidyar Network. And the point of bringing this very diverse group together, even as funders, was to ensure that different disciplines were learning from each other. And that as corporates and the asset management community in particular embarked on measuring and managing impacts, they did so making sure to look left and right at the other disciplines who had been doing this work for a very long time: social science, development, philanthropy, and of course governments, who do this kind of work every day to make public policy decisions. So the IMP's initial work was bringing together different disciplines to debate these topics, and I will show you a very simple slide that summarizes some of the important consensus that came out of that next. Here you can see that one of the things we started by doing back in 2016, when this project began, was to say to the various disciplines, you know, how do you get to a simple language that really talks about the performance, the actual impacts and the nature of those impacts on the world, rather than describing impact through intentions or through labels. So just as an example, in the asset management community in particular, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with framings like thematic investing, ESG integration, ESG investing, positive impact investing, responsible investing, sustainable investing. I could go on and on. There are many, many labels being used in the asset management community today to describe, in effect, what those investments are doing to the world. But the problem with those labels is that they are not agreed upon globally. So they're used in very subjective ways. And if we really want to move the money the way that Sir Ronald described to generate the level of change we need in the world, we can't have investments categorized on subjective labels. It risks greenwashing, it risks rainbow washing, which is the current concern, and it also really doesn't allow impact investors as a community to also lead the way. Because unless impact investors are talking about the real world impacts that they have through their investments, using the same logic and language that the rest of the market is using, they can't distinguish themselves, and they can't make sure that they're at the vanguard and leading the way. So it's as important to the impact investment community to have a conversation with the wider investment community about this as it is for the whole investment community to have a conversation with social science, development and philanthropy. And so on this slide, what you can see here is just a very simple framing that everyone agreed on, which was the idea that regardless of your motivation, whether you are interested in measuring and managing your impacts because you want to mitigate risk, or you're doing it because you want to enhance your financial return, maybe you want to align with long-term sustainable growth as a business, or you're actually doing it because you want to make a net positive contribution to climate change or to tackle the education gap in India, you're going to require impact measurement no matter what, regardless of your motivation, because each of those motivations maps across to...
Clara.
Yes.
Excuse me for interrupting you. Maybe I'm probably not the only one, but I'm still on the first slide. So for some reason...
Okay. Maybe this is not showing you. Let me move this on. Let me try this.
Thank you.
Can you see this now?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
okay. I don't know why it had frozen, but thank you for saying that so quickly, because I really want to bring you along with me. The logos I should just show you, I referred to on the last slide when I was speaking, are shown there, and you can see that they're global as well, from Japan to the UK to emerging markets as well. This is the slide I was just speaking to. This idea that you've got these illustrative motivations that many different investors and companies have, but that all of them require impact measurement in order to deliver on those motivations. And very simply, for those companies and investors that are driven by a desire to mitigate financial risk or to behave responsibly, you're really looking at underlying assets in a portfolio that are acting to avoid harm. And for that, you need to measure that there is mitigation or reduction of negative outcomes for people and the planet. For those who are looking to drive long-term sustainable growth, that's not enough. Those who are looking at it that way are going to need additional information on the positive outcomes that are occurring for people on the planet when they engage with the assets in the portfolio. And then for those who are actually motivated because they are trying to close the education gap, for example, they're going to be looking for yet more information on whether those positive outcomes are actually being generated for otherwise underserved populations or natural resources. And so that very simple logic allowed the many organizations that engage in this effort to agree that you can't determine whether those things are happening unless you're measuring impacts. You need it for the A, the B, and the C. And when I come on in a moment to talk about impact weighted accounts, the beauty of impact weighted accounts is that they allow you to look at a company and establish the combination of its A's, B's and C's and what it actually means for the world to a very precise level of detail. And that allows you to move beyond just talking about, impacts and companies in terms of the type of impact they have, which is on this slide, to actually being very specific and saying, yes, but which company is better? How do we get to that very specific level of detail? And that hasn't been done before. And so the next dimension I want to just add on to this for you all, because it is important and it's an additional dimension to what Sir Ronald was describing, is the fact that as an impact investment community, and as this is relevant for the corporate community as well, insofar as they are also investing from their own balance sheet, the impact that you have on the world is not just based on the impact of the underlying assets that you're investing in. It's also based on what you do as an investor to enable those underlying assets to either change their behavior or grow. And the way in which you can codify that is by looking at these 4 strategies. So as an investor, you can either simply signal that measurable impact matters by choosing to invest or divest. So that's your allocation choices, or you can engage actively. Obviously in private equity, that's very natural. You're sitting on the boards of companies, you're taking a hands-on role, but we're seeing increasing shareholder activism in the public markets, which is really to be welcomed and is a very powerful way of changing the behavior of big businesses. And then you've got growing new or undersupplied capital markets, which is really looking at where the mainstream capital markets aren't going and trying to use capital to drive growth there. And that's very much what the development finance institutions are doing with their niche of investing. And then finally, of course, you can not just grow a new or undersupplied capital market, you can actually provide flexibility on risk-adjusted financial return to do that, which the mainstream markets would not do. So I just wanted to show you that to add that additional dimension to how you think about impact investment and how it gets measured. Because what we're finding now is that you not only measure the underlying assets, you also are starting to disclose how you as an investor are playing a role in that change through these different strategies. And just to give you a flavour of why that's powerful, you can see here real world investments, asset managers that have classified their products using this logic. So you can see the ABC is the impacts that are happening in terms of the underlying assets, and then the investor contribution. Typically investors will bundle different strategies in order to drive growth or behavior change in those assets. And you can see here, this allows you to show that Standard Life, their European Ethical Equity Fund, is a very different type of impact to what Bridges Social Impact Bond Fund is doing, which is over in the C column and is using a combination of signaling, engaging and growing new or undersupplied markets. And so I wanted to give you this framing because for those of you who are you share the ambition that Sir Ronald has described in terms of getting as quickly as we can to standardise measures and ultimately to impact weighted accounts. You don't need to wait for that to change the way you invest and the way you disclose the types of impact that your portfolio is having. You can use the logic that I've just shown you now to do that today. And as an example of that, I wanted to show you PGGM's portfolio because they're 220 billion euros under management. They were in 2017 when this was done. They were the second largest pension fund in Europe at the time. And you can see, even without the precision of measurement that we're actually working towards, just by looking at the types of impact you're having in the way I just showed you, based on the data that you have available, you can already classify a portfolio of the scale of PGGMs. And it's very powerful because it immediately shows you that there is 14% of that portfolio that's not even on here because they don't have any data on any measurable impact data on the underlying assets. But then the rest of it, they've actually, as a very progressive pension fund, been able to gather enough data to classify the types of impact. But you can see that they are still 50% of the pension fund in the top left. And they are very, very small percentages over on the right, especially as you move down. And so this has allowed PGGM to take stock of where they are today and then develop a 5-year investment policy based on this to transition that portfolio over time. And the question that they ask more than anything else is, it's great to have this logic, but how can we then within each of the boxes on this matrix get to that real precision of measurement that allows us to compare individual assets rather than just group assets based on the type of impact that they're having? And that's really the segue to impact weighted accounts that I wanted to make for you all. So